nation, which expects to be the leader of other nations, can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
Hello and welcome to the Terran Space Academy, where we help you prepare for a bright future in the space industry. I spend most of my time studying science and medicine, packing my brain with as many facts as it can hold. Because the left side of the brain is more analytical and fact-oriented in most people, while the right side is more creative, intuitive, and big-picture focused, my brain sometimes gets so heavy with facts that I start tilting to the left when I walk. To balance myself back out, I read a lot of science fiction books and watch a lot of movies. My secret vice is that even though I have never seen convincing evidence of the supernatural, I love hearing strange and scary stories. That's one reason why I am promoting this awesome new channel I found. It's called Strange with 3 A's, and you may have seen a promo for it at the start of this lesson. Now, I have been on this planet quite a while, and during my stay here, I was honored to serve my country, first in the Strategic Air Command, and later in U.S. Space Command, going underground and controlling Minuteman II ICBMs, to keep the world safe from, at that time, the Soviet Union. I described this world more fully in this lesson. Satan is a Russian nuclear-armed missile system, by the way. During my service, I was stationed for a time at Malmstrom Air Force Base, here in Montana. While at this base, we received a briefing about this incident that happened long before my time. While I do not discuss the content of classified briefings on this channel, no matter how much time has passed, I can say that what we heard about the incident does not mesh with the public story that was made up. That does not necessarily mean that an extraterrestrial was involved. As I explained in this lesson, it is more likely that an off-world craft came from one of the gas giants or their moons than that someone was able to cross the desolate gulf between the stars. But while extraterrestrial visitation is incredibly unlikely, it's not impossible. And while I have long been a skeptic that there is proof of such visits, sometimes things happen that seem to defy logical explanation. Everyone in the space industry today knows that this man, a respected intelligence officer from the United States Air Force, has said that we have captured what they call exobiospheric organisms, or EBOs. If you're wondering why the government is always changing these acronyms, it's so you can't get up-to-date information when you file a Freedom of Information Act request. Congress has said that the people have a right to know what their government is up to, so that we don't have any more COINTELPRO or MKUltra scandals, or any more victims of these projects. But while Congress can say we should have access, those in power can always say no, believing that, while they can handle certain knowledge, the rest of us are just too weak-minded and must be lied to. And that's why UFOs become UAPs and ETs become EBOs. I truly don't know what to think of this gentleman. He has an honorable record and seems very sincere. I believe that he believes what he is saying. But he may have fallen victim to a disinformation campaign. This wouldn't be the first time the U.S. government fed lies to the American people. Far from it. In the 1980s, a man named Paul Bennewitz lived near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. He reported seeing strange objects in the area over the Air Force Base. These objects were seen over nuclear weapons storage areas, which the U.S. military takes very seriously. The Air Force sent Special Agent Richard Doty to speak to Mr. Bennewitz. Special Agent Doty was probably with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the Air Force version of NCIS. But Agent Doty was not told to ask Mr. Bennewitz to keep things under his hat for the good old US of A because those were American craft, or simply just to stay quiet about it if they were alien craft. But instead, Agent Doty was told to lie to him. Doty was told to talk to Mr. Bennewitz and tell him that a hostile alien invasion was about to take place. Now, if you really want to F up the life of any American citizen, Have someone in real authority tell them the world is about to end, especially if that citizen is a military veteran, as Mr. Bennewitz was, having served with the Coast Guard during World War II. Agent Doty had also been ordered to create false documents that would prove these claims. Special Agent Doty carried out these orders, even providing some of the fake documents to other UFO researchers. When Mr. Bennewitz and others tried to warn the public, the Air Force denied all knowledge of anything, labeling these men as nutjobs. Mr. Bennewitz barricaded himself in his home with sandbags. His family didn't understand why he would believe something so crazy, and had him admitted to a nearby mental hospital. In 1989, a UFO researcher that was informing for the government apparently admitted that they had pushed Mr. Bennewitz toward a mental breakdown. This was corroborated by a declassified CIA document that admitted this operative and Agent Doty were carrying out government orders. Those of you familiar with the U.S. system of government might be saying, wait a minute, the CIA is not supposed to operate on U.S. soil. And it is a fact that they are not. But watch the movie Wormwood sometime, if you want to see how lawless the really powerful are in the land of the free. Bennewitz is dead now, and buried at the Santa Fe Cemetery. And the stories he was told has had repercussions that echo down even now, with this gentleman blowing himself up, believing that lizard people were about to take over. And now Mr. David Grush is telling Congress about crashed UFOs, UAPs, and captured alien bodies. I hope he's considered that those he trusts the most may be lying to him. On orders from the same U.S. government he wore the uniform to protect. That being said, I'm curious to know, is there any real evidence of alien bodies? And my new favorite channel served up this video about another whistleblower, this one a molecular biologist apparently, who laid out the scientific facts about alien bodies on Reddit. Well, I'm not a molecular biologist, but I do have a medical doctorate, and a master's degree in space science, and a certificate in astrobiology. Let's see what this gentleman said about an exobiospheric organism, and see if it rings true. You may notice some extraneous sounds as I'm at my computer, rather than in the recording studio. Here we go, on a forum apparently titled Aliens. From the late 2000s to the mid-2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms, EBOs. I will share with you a lot of information on this subject. Feel free to ask questions or ask for clarification. It seems like all my comments are being deleted. I will post answer at the end of the message. Okay. From the late 2000s to the mid-2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms. The aim of the program was to elucidate the genome and proteome basis of these organisms. Okay, so the genome is genetic material, the proteome are the proteins produced by those genetic materials. Although the study of OBCs has been going on for decades in other programs, maybe he meant OBC. Does anyone see what that acronym stands for? I do not. Has been going on for decades in other programs. The new high-throughput DNA sequencing technologies of the late 90s unblocked stagnant research in this area. That's very, very true. The Human Genome Project and Mr. Ventnor, the technology that was developed has dramatically improved our ability to sequence DNA to the point that it can be done for about $1,000 and you can have every codon read. Since then, several breakthroughs have led to significant advances in our understanding of the genome and proteome of these beings. What we've learned so far has enabled us to outline some disconcerting perspectives about our place in this universe. Briefly, we've discovered that the EBO genome is a chimera of genomes from our biosphere and from an unknown one. They are artificial, ephemeral, and disposable organisms created for a purpose that still partially eludes us. I'll be substantiating my claims after a brief introduction. So what's he saying there? He's saying that the organisms we are seeing in these crashed craft are not the aliens that evolved on another planet. They are genetically engineered to survive on our world and work like organic probes to evaluate us. Okay, let's see why he believes this. The reason for disclosing these secrets is quite simple. I believe that every human being has the right to know the truth, and that to progress, humanity needs to divest itself of certain institutions and organizations that will probably not survive these revelations in the long term. I'm aware that I'll have very little impact in this regard, but I still believe that small leaks are necessary to break the dam of misinformation on this subject. When the governments will eventually reveal these secrets, there will undoubtedly be a societal upheaval. But in my opinion, the longer we wait, the worse it will be. I choose to divulge what I know anonymously out of selfishness for the well-being of myself and my family. I'm aware that this diminishes the reach and credibility of my message, but it's the furthest I am willing to go. I chose this forum because it offers a good compromise between anonymity and popularity. In order to protect my anonymity, I will be purposefully vague or even contradictory about any information that could identify me: date, education, role, etc. I'll even introduce red herrings in this respect. I want to make it clear that any information related to the subject of the research will not be treated in this way. Okay, probably prudent, if he really is who he says he is. I would assume it's not terribly safe if Mr. Bennewitz experiences any guide. Before going any further, please excuse me if you find it difficult to understand what I'm explaining. Some parts of my text are very technical. It's difficult to find the right balance between vulgarization and scientific explanation. By there, he's using vulgarization in the form of common expression, not rudeness. I'll continue by talking about myself. What's the point of talking about me knowing that the information will necessarily be misleading? I simply wanted to introduce a perspective on the type of people who work there, normal scientists. I have a PhD in molecular biology. I didn't actively seek to be part of this program. Rather, it was a stroke of luck that introduced me to one of the senior scientists. I met this person at a conference while I was presenting a poster on my PhD research. When I think back, I don't believe he was impressed by what I was presenting, because it was, quite frankly, a project that wasn't going anywhere. I think it was rather the most important aspect of a professional life: the attitude and the ease with which you make connections. Shortly afterwards, I graduated and received a call from the person offering me a position. At the time, everything pointed to me working in a regular laboratory. Okay, here he should have been much more cautious. Any senior researcher is going to be well known by the government. They will be tracking phone calls, and I think he's given away too much, but perhaps he's being a little misleading there, so who knows? Maybe he's sending them on a wild goose chase. I did a series of 3 increasingly suspicious interviews, each in a different location, where my scientific background and knowledge became less and less relevant. The first was with 2 of the senior scientists, the second and third with people I've never seen again and who were obviously not interested in science. Sometime after the interview, I was asked to go to a 4th location, where what seemed like a corporate lawyer presented me with an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. He made sure that not only to explain every detail, but also that I understood the consequence of not respecting it. So a non-disclosure agreement is more of a civil agreement, kind of a contract that you will not disclose information. However, it can be enforced by the government, and it can be a crime to disclose information if you've agreed not to. The first employment weeks were by far the most memorable, although I spent most of that time in a depressing archive room. It consists almost exclusively of reading about the subject of study and to get us up to speed. There's no secret Wikipedia or even a reference book to guide us. There are only dry reports, memos, presentations, procedures, and SOPs, standard operating procedures. These documents are almost exclusively about the biology of EBOs, but there are also a few that deal with other subjects such as their food, religion, or culture. There were no documents on their technology. I find it very interesting that they have a religion, but it may be more of a philosophy, but maybe it is a religion, who knows. As mentioned above, the aim of the project is to gain a better understanding of the EBO genome and proteome. To achieve this, a team of around 20 scientists, 4 senior scientists, and a director was involved. The scientists, like myself, had as their main responsibility to carry out the technical work. As each scientist had, to my knowledge, a PhD, we were all somewhat overqualified for what is ultimately a technician's job. The senior scientists, who make full use of their diplomas, had the task of designing the assays and had a supervisory responsibility. They were also in charge of training new employees and sometimes even came in to do technical work. The director, of course, was the person in charge who dictated priorities to the senior scientists. He was rarely on site, and the few times he was, it was to attend meetings. Other than the scientific staff, there were security guards working for one subcontractor or another. There were no support staff such as janitors or maintenance workers. Scientists were responsible for this kind of work. In addition, logistical constraints ensure that every scientist is capable of carrying out any technical activity. The laboratory itself is located in Fort Detrick, Maryland, in a building used for legitimate biomedical research. Okay, most people who read about any of this stuff knows that Fort Detrick, Maryland is sort of the U.S. Was the biological warfare site, research site, and it is the biomedical research site as far as I know. The clandestine operations are carried out in a restricted part of the basement, out of sight from regular workers. Contrary to what one might imagine, the biosafety level is not maximal for this type of research. Indeed, the lab containing the EBO samples or derived cell cultures is BSL-3, while the lab where assays are conducted are only BSL-2. So biological safety level 1, 2, 3. 3 is pretty severe. Serious diseases, maybe, who knows, malaria might be in that. BSL-4 would be like Ebola, stuff like that. The BSL-3 area of the facility, that's what I remember. We can look them up later. The BSL-3 area of the facility includes a freezer room and a cell culture lab and is only accessible through an antechamber from the BSL-2 section. EBO carcasses are preserved in horizontal freezers at a temperature of -80 centigrade nominal. To maximize the preservation of these carcasses, they are preserved in vacuum bags, and the air in the room is controlled to minimize humidity. There are only 4 bodies, and none of them are complete. It's obvious that these creatures have died as a result of major trauma. I've never witnessed a motorcycle accident fatality, but it probably looks similar to this. It is acknowledged that there are more EBO carcasses at other locations. The cell culture laboratory, as its name suggests, is where cell lines derived from EBOs are grown and related activities are performed. I'll talk in more detail about these specific cell lines later on. The BSL-2 part is mainly used for assays, immunohistochemistry, genetic engineering, immunocytochemistry, storage, etc. There's also a cell culture lab, but this is used for more traditional cell lines. Okay, now I have often used ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 to help me with my research and even to get me started on writing a subject. I doubt if that's what this is. But you could tell ChatGPT write such and such a story in the manner of someone who was such and such, and it could brilliantly create something like this. Either that, or it's someone who really does have a pretty good understanding of these subjects or did a lot of research. Other than the labs, there are all the amenities you could find in an office. Note that the internet access is limited to senior staff and up. There is, however, an intranet for bioinformatics needs. So bioinformatics is just the statistical information sent back and forth about genetics and stuff like that. On the subject of the biology of these beings, I'll start by discussing genetics, then their gross anatomy, and finally their biological systems. For the sake of clarity, the information that I provide here is an aggregation of what I have observed and what I have read. I will make many comparisons with human anatomy because it is the most logical reference. All right, let's start with genetics. First, I'd like to discuss their genetics. Their genetics are like ours, based on DNA. This fact was very puzzling for me when I first learned about it. We imagine that beings from an alternate biosphere would have genetics based on a completely foreign biochemical system, and surprisingly, this is not the case. Several conclusions can be drawn from this surprising revelation. The one that immediately comes to mind is that our biosphere and theirs share a common ancestry. They're eukaryotes, which means their cells have nuclei containing genetic material, which suggests that their biosphere would have been separated from ours sometime after the appearance of this type of organism. The term exobiospheric organism is actually a misnomer, but as it's a historical term, it's still used. Their genetics are not only based on the same genetic system, but they're also even compatible with our own cellular machinery. This means that you can take a human genome, insert it into an EBO cell, and that gene will be translated into protein, and this of course works in reverse with a human gene inserted into an EBO cell. There are important differences in post-translational modifications that will make the final protein non-functional, but I'll discuss these later. The genome consists of 16 circular chromosomes. Now let's talk about this. Okay, now he's not discussing the possibility that these things were completely manufactured from Earth DNA to survive and live on Earth, and the things that created them could have completely different DNA. The chance of our codons. A codon is a 3-letter word. Okay, start at the beginning. DNA is information is transmitted, is encoded in bases, base pairs, A, C, T, and G. A binds with T and C with G. And any 3 of these letters make a codon. A codon is read as an instruction like start or stop or an amino acid. About Yeah, 99% of our genome, he goes on to say that later, is junk DNA, meaning it appears to be unused DNA, or at least it doesn't code for proteins. Now, some of it has been shown to have other uses, but he's talking about 16 circular chromosomes. So those would be like plasmids. And if you were going to make a synthetic organism, as human beings just recently did by making a basic cell with the minimum amount of DNA that we could find, if someone was going to do that, perhaps they would use circular chromosomes. And so, again, I find it extremely unlikely, to the point of impossibility, that these things would have evolved on another world for their DNA machinery to read the same codons, or for the DNA language to even be coded the same. Even if an alien being used A, C, T, and G in their DNA, the chances of the codons being the same is so unlikely as to be just about impossible. It's much more likely that they would be manufactured that way, if this has any realism to it. You're probably familiar with the concept of intergenic regions, or junk DNA. These are basically DNA sequences that don't code for proteins. These are evolutionary residues, transposons, inactivated genes, and so on. To give you an idea, in humans, intergenic regions represent approximately 99% of our genome. I'm aware that these sequences aren't completely useless. They can be used as histone anchors, as buffers to protect coding DNA from radiation, or even as alternative open reading frames, but that's rather peripheral. Okay, now understand, I'm reading this for the first time. This guy seems to know what he's doing, okay? Or he used an AI to help him write this. What's particularly striking about the EBO genome is the uniformity of these intergenic regions. We see the same sequences repeated everywhere, and the distance in base pairs between the genes is virtually the same throughout their genome. The result is a minimalist, highly condensed genome. In fact, it's much smaller than ours. Moreover, the quantity of protein-coded genes is even significantly lower than ours, probably due to genetic refinement, but also to biological processes that are absent in EBOs. The uniformity of these sequences is a major indication of the artificiality of these beings. There is no complex organism on Earth that has such elegance in its sequences. There is no evolutionary pressure that can lead to this kind of characteristic other than genetic engineering. I would agree. If that is how the DNA looks, I would agree with his assumptions there. Speaking of genetic engineering, following sequencing of their genomes, we noticed a troubling and universal characteristic in the 5' of the regulatory sequence of each gene, which we call the tripalindromic region. TPR are 134 base pair sequences containing, as its name suggests, 3 palindromes. In genetics, a palindrome is a DNA sequence that, when read in the same direction, gives the same sequence on both DNA strands. So, we know what palindromes are. It's like when Napoleon Bonaparte said, "Able was I ere I saw Elba." That reads the same forward and backward. They serve both as a flag and as a binding site for proteins. The 3 palindromes in the TPR are distinct from one another and have been poetically named 5P TPR, M TPR, and 3' TPR. And TPR is composed in the 5 to 3 order, and 5P TPR 12 base pair spacer, chromosomal address, 12 base pair spacer, MTPR, 12 base pair spacer, gene address, 12 base pair spacer, and 3' TPR. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. The chromosomal address is composed of 4 base pairs and is identical in each TPR of the same chromosome, but distinct between each of the 16 chromosomes of the genome. The gene address is a 64 base pair sequence that is unique for each gene in the whole genome. It's therefore understandable that the TPR serves as a unique address, not only for numerically identifying a gene, but also for identifying its chromosomal location. For those with only a basic knowledge of genetics, this is completely unheard of. No living thing in our biosphere has this kind of precise address in its genome. Once again, the presence of TPR cannot be explained by evolutionary pressure, but only by genetic engineering on a genomic scale. Now, when I say I don't know what that means up above, I don't mean I'm not following what he's saying. I mean, I haven't heard of this before in medical school or anywhere else. So this would be something new, and which he seems to be relating to us here. Now, TPR, one more time, stands for the tripalindromic region. A region with 3 palindromes, a region with 3 sequences of DNA that can be read forward or backwards. So, tripalindromic region, TPR, opens the door to several possibilities. One of them suggests that EBO geneticists can insert or remove a gene from a cell in a way that is far more targeted and efficient than our technology allows. No proteins have been identified in the EBO genome that interacts with TPR. Rather, we believe that these proteins are exclusively targeted by external genetic engineering tools, probably used at the zygotic stage of embryonic development. The nature of these tools is unclear, but we definitely don't have anything like them. probable absence of these proteins from the genome is a further indication of their artificiality. Given the high probability of artificiality of their genome and the apparent ease of modifying it with biomolecular tools, it's not out of the question that there could be polymorphism between individuals depending on their role and function. So they may not all be exactly the same. Polymorphism, polymorphism actually literally changes or body changes. In other words, an individual could be genetically designed to have characteristics that give an advantage in performing a given task, like soldier ants and worker ants in an anthill. Note that these previous statements are speculation. To my knowledge, only one individual genome has been sequenced. I can't make a definitive statement on genetic variation between individuals. I would bet good money that they've all been sequenced, and if this is real, then he only got access to one of them. The kind of termite or anthill comparison is not a bad one. And understand that even in genetic twins, right? So even in human genetic twins, by the time the cell divides a few times and then splits into two, and those go on to become separate organisms, identical twins, there will be 5 to 6 mutations in those two identical twins by the time they're born. So even if you start the same, that doesn't mean you end up exactly the same, because there will be mutations. I don't know how many such a simplified set of chromosomes would have as they divide. It's interesting. I've talked a lot about intergenic regions, and now I'll briefly discuss intragenic sequences, so the areas that do code for proteins. Briefly, because there's not a lot to say despite its obvious importance. Much like ours, their genes have silencers, enhancers, promoters, 5 UTRs, exons, introns, 3 UTRs, etc. There are many genes analogous to ours, which is not surprising given the compatibility of our cellular machinery. What's disturbing is that some genes correspond directly, nucleotide by nucleotide, with known human genes or even some animal genes. For these genes, there doesn't seem to be any artificial refinement, but rather a crude copying and pasting. Why they do it is nebulous and still subject to conjecture. There are also many genes which are not found in our biosphere whose role has not been identified. Finding the purpose of these novel genes is one of the aims of the program. I'd like to note before going any further that this heterogeneity of genes of known and unknown origin is an undeniable proof of the artificiality of EBOs. All right. To conclude with genetics, the mitochondrial genome, at the time I was working there, had not yet been sequenced. It's safe to assume that this genome would also be streamlined and possibly has some version of TPR. Now, transcription and translation and protein expression. I briefly introduced the differences in post-translational modifications between human and EBO. This is hardly a surprise, as we often see the same thing between different terrestrial species. Obtaining a viable protein from a DNA sequence is a complex process involving hundreds of protein intermediates, each with a precise and essential role. A minor variation in this assembly line can lead to functional irregularities in the final product. So it's no surprise that there are setbacks along the way when the first EBO gene transfection attempts failed to produce the desired functional protein in human cell lines. So they're saying they'd put the alien DNA in human cell lines and the proteins wouldn't be made right and they wouldn't work right. Fortunately for us, the work of what I imagine to be another team at another site has led to the development of an EBO cell line named EPIG11, derived from epithelial tissues. Okay, this makes sense. So they've taken some alien skin cells and are growing them in a nutrient broth. We can do this with human cells, and they will grow these skin stem cells and create new cells, and they'll actually use them on burn patients so they can be covered with their own skin if they have the time to. With this tool in our hands, we were able to transfect and overexpress proteins of interest in order to eventually purify and study them. For your information, we use a biological ballistics delivery system, aka gene gun, for our transfection needs because other methods are not very effective with cells of this line. So they are using a physical gun to throw genes through the cell membrane into the nucleus of the cell. For example, the viral vectors tested cannot be internalized by EPIG11, and liquefaction is too lethal. Okay, so they can't dissolve part of the cell membrane. That'll kill it. The viruses, of course, can't unlock the alien cells. So EPIG11, like most eukaryotic cell lines, enters a phase of exponential growth when exposed to fetal bovine serum. Okay, so serum that is used for fetal cows when they're growing. It helps make a lot of things grow, including stem cell lines when we want to grow some stem cells or grow some skin cells or something. It's only half surprising that a cell line from such an exotic source should be sensitive to the growth factors present in fetal bovine serum. In my opinion, this can be explained by the addition of animal genes to the genome, such as growth receptors. Yeah, but human cells respond to FBS too, so if these things are made from captured and abducted human DNA samples, it would make sense that the FBS would work on them. They're morphologically very similar to the gray aliens that are part of modern folklore. Their height is about 150 centimeters, so 1.5 meters. A meter is 40 inches. We're looking at 60 inches tall, 5 feet. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Still, there are some notable differences. He didn't say anything about any other appendages, so I assume that's one of the notable differences. Skin. The gray skin that is often described in folklore is in fact a biosynthetic film, which likely serves to protect the EBO from a hostile environment. Okay, so this is like the day the Earth stood still. They've got a bio-suit. It doesn't provide effective protection against temperature changes, but it does offer adequate protection against the passage of liquids. It's possible this film confers other advantages, but my knowledge on the subject is limited. Under the gray film, the epidermis is rather white, and the texture is very regular and without any hair. We do not see any defect other than the folds near the joints. It's described as greasy in one report, but that's not something I've observed. Same report states that a strong lingering smell of burnt hair and ammonia is present when the film is removed. All right, not getting many dates down here. There are a lot of pores on the skin, crossing from the epidermis to a gland in the hypodermis. So crossing from the top layer of skin to the next layer of skin. These glands and pores are the terminal part of the excretory sudoriferous system, which could explain the previously mentioned smell. So apparently, these beings excrete waste products as we do through our kidneys. They do through their skin that's absorbed by their biosuit. A lot of surface area there. It's kind of an interesting way to do it. It may make it very easy for them to travel long distances in cryosleep or some form of torpor or hibernation. Just saying. Speculation on my part. Head. The head contains 2 large, oversized eyes, 2 nostrils without protuberance, a narrow mouth without lips, and 2 ear canals without auricles. So no ears on the outside. There is a mandible, so there is a lower jaw, but the musculature is vestigial, so they can't put the big chomp to anything. Kind of like comparing our jaw to that of a Neanderthal or any of our ancient human ancestors who could have bit our arm off. There are no teeth or tongue in the oral cavity. Okay, it's soft diet only. The nasal cavity where the nostrils meet is compact and does not rise cranially, but extends axially. So it does not curve up into the head the way ours does, but does poke back into the head. There appears to be no equivalent to the olfactory bulb in the nasal cavity. Smell is not a big thing for them. That might be air intake only. The mouth leads directly to the esophagus and the nasal cavity to the trachea. Okay. The trachea and esophagus do not communicate. Okay, so these things don't have the little flap we have that sometimes malfunctions and causes us to choke to death. So they could drink water and breathe at the same time. That's pretty interesting. The eye. Like the skin, the eyes are covered with semi-transparent biosynthetic film that offers the same environmental protection while providing protection against certain wavelengths and light intensity. When the film is removed, a more traditional eye is revealed. It's about 3 times larger than a human eye, and there are no eyelids. Okay, the glands that lubricate it must be pretty interesting. The size of their eyes suggests that they have excellent night vision, which may be why they have a biomembrane to filter out some of our light. It seems paradoxical to cover them with a semi-opaque film. Perhaps they only need to wear it in a bright environment. Their sclera is the same color as their skin. The iris is pale gray, and the pupil is black and oversized. The lens is rounder than a human. Interesting. And the musculature used to adjust focus is more developed. Okay. On the retina, there are at least 6 types of cone cells. So they can see colors that we cannot. Okay. Humans have 3 cone cells. Some females have 4. So there are females who can see colors that men cannot. Women often see things that men just cannot see. But these things can see things that even women cannot see. The responsiveness of each of these 6 types of cone is specific to a wavelength band with a minimum of overlap between each other. The result is a broader visible spectrum. So maybe something like the Mr. Shrimp. The shrimp can see colors that we cannot imagine. So imagine a colorblind person trying to see colors that they just can't see, and then that's you trying to see things this thing can see. Ear. As mentioned, the outer ear has no auricle, and the ear canal is unremarkable. The inner ear has all the characteristics of a typical vestibular and cochlear system, although the curvature of the cochlea is more pronounced than a human. This probably results in greater hearing acuity for low frequencies. Okay, so what do they mean? Vestibular. So we have little rocks in our ears that are in a little organ that helps us keep balance. So we've got 3 semicircular canals that work like gyroscopes and tell us if our heads or bodies move in any one of those 3 axes. And then we have a gravity detector where little rocks tell us what's up and down. And then the cochlear system, that's the seashell looking thing that sound travels through to stimulate hair cells to send a signal through the cochlear nerve to the primary auditory cortex so we can hear stuff. So if the curvature of the cochlea is more pronounced than a human, then they have greater hearing acuity for lower frequencies and perhaps less hearing for high frequencies. I don't know. Brain is tetraspheric. Okay, so the human brain is hemispheric, two hemispheres. Two hemispheres make a sphere. So we have a left and right hemispheres. If there's this tetraspheric, then they have four separate, you can't say hemispheres, quadrispheres. Yeah, quadrispheres. Composed of four major sections. The sections are separated by transverse and longitudinal fissures, so is ours, and are connected to the central lobe, which acts as a brainstem and cerebellum. Okay, so they have four separate functioning brains. Like we have two hemispheres, they have four quadrispheres communicating through the brainstem and cerebellum, similar to how ours does. The volume of the brain is around 20% superior to that of a man of the same height. Now, don't think because men have bigger brains that they are smarter than women. Neurons are the same size. We have more insulation. We have a larger body surface area. I don't know. It has a much more pronounced level of gyrication. Okay, the gyri are the hills on the surface of the brain than an average human. If you want to see what a more pronounced level of gyrication looks like, look at a dolphin brain compared to a human brain. I'll try to put them on the screen now. The dolphin has higher gyrication and a bigger brain than a human. So a dolphin has more raw processing power than a human being. Now, a lot of that probably goes to decoding their sonar. Moreover, the ratio, because half of our brain goes to decoding vision, by the way. Moreover, the ratio of glial cells to neurons is also slightly higher than in humans. Glial cells are the support cells. They also take some part in processing from the latest research on human brain cells. And then if they have neurons, those are the usually processing cells. There's all kinds of neurons. It is important to mention the presence of nodules on the central lobe, okay, the center part of the brain where the quadrispheres came together. Histological analysis of these structures reveals a kind of intricate biological circuitry. It is speculation that these nodules are essential to interact with their technology. Consequently, determining the proteome of these structures is an absolute priority for the program. So possibly these guys have biological radio receivers in their brains. So they might be able to send and receive radio waves, microwaves, I don't know, something. Electromagnetic waves that can be detected by their technology. And maybe that's why they don't speak, because when your esophagus and your trachea are completely separate, you can't talk the way we do. The reason we choke to death on a steak if we don't chew it well is so we can speak. Neck. The neck is proportionally longer than that of a human, at the same time relatively thin. As mentioned, the esophagus and trachea are separate. There are no vocal cords in this region. Thorax. The musculature of the thorax is underdeveloped. Muscles equivalent to the pectoralis major can be seen. We can also see the trapezius and deltoid muscles. The sternocleidomastoids are well defined. The ribs and sternum are clearly visible. There are no nipples. Dun, dun, dun. The musculature of the thorax is well developed. Okay. Pectoralis major. Those are the muscles on the chest that pull your arms in. The trapezius muscle is the one you shrug up, and it gives sort of a delta shape to your head. And the Cardassians had huge ones in Star Trek, by the way. Deltoid muscles are on the outside of your shoulder and abduct or lift up the arm. Sternocleidomastoids are the two muscles that kind of go from just behind your jawline, kind of right behind your ear at the mastoid process where these connect down to the sternal area. So sternocleidomastoid, mastoid area to the sternum, and they can move their head. And it also connects to the clavicle a little bit, hence the cleido. So that helps you turn your head left and right. The ribs and sternum are clearly visible. Okay, there are no nipples. What does no nipples mean? Well, they're not really necessary if an organism is not going to reproduce. And they exist in men just because all humans start female. And then testosterone kicks in and masculinizes us. But all human fetus start female. Abdomen. The abdomen is wider than thorax and bulges slightly forward. Interesting. There is no navel. No, okay, so these things are not born with a placental sac and all that. Pelvis. The pelvic bones are apparent. There are no genitals or anus. Okay, well, that's distressing. But apparently they only take in liquids and excrete liquids through their skin. Pelvic bones are apparent. So they have pelvic bones, of course. I hope so. They'd have trouble ambulating otherwise. Hands and feet. Their hands have 4 digits, including an opposable thumb on the medial side. Now, this is interesting. If they were cloning humans and making human-like things to walk around on Earth, why wouldn't they make them look exactly like humans? Well, maybe that's too complicated for them, and they're afraid they'd make a run for it. So they genetically program them to be mild and subservient and do what they're supposed to do. Why only 4 digits? I would argue this may indicate that whatever made them has 4 digits. And they think of that as being symmetrical and normal. Or it just wasn't necessary to have a fifth digit like we do. Our little pinky finger's not always necessary to be there. And including an opposable thumb on the medial side. Well, we would hope so. They have no nails, and the texture of their fingerprints is composed of concentric circles. Oh, interesting. Fingers are proportionally much longer than in humans. Unlike humans, finger musculature is entirely intrinsic to the hand. Okay, we've got tiny little muscles in our fingers. Apparently they don't. All the muscles are in the hand. Most of the finger movement is controlled by muscles in our hand, and our hand movement is controlled by muscles in our wrist, and so on. In other words, the muscles used to move fingers are not in the forearms, but entirely located in the hands. The opposite of what I just said. So they do have muscles in their hands, but not in their forearms. Well, they're not going to have a very strong grip. So if you get into a wrestling match with one, he better have advanced technology, or you are going to go to town on him. At first glance, the medial toe is marginally larger than the distal toe. So the toes are kind of fat in the middle and taper as they go out. Wait, I missed something. At first glance, the feet consist of just 2 digits. But in necropsy soon determined that each toe was made of 2 fused digits. That's interesting. There is a genetic variant on Earth where some humans have this also. And I'll try to show a picture of that. The medial toe is marginally longer than the distal toe, so it's got 2 toes. One toward the middle, medial, one toward the outside, distal. Feet are relatively longer and narrower than in a human. Their musculature, however, is vestigial. So they don't have, they can't do squats. Probably can't run very far. Chase one down easily. They probably can't catch you, so if they come after you, try to dodge the tractor beam and bob and weave. The EBO's endoskeleton is very similar to ours, at least in terms of composition. There's collagen, hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that makes up human bones, but also copper oxide crystals where marrow would normally be found. Interesting. The roles of these crystals has not been established, but it is not a crystallopathic condition. Okay, he's saying it is not an abnormal condition of their bones. They seem to have been engineered this way. The blood cells of the myeloid lineage, or the equivalent of these creatures. Okay, so myeloid, usually the cell producing areas of our bone, therefore mature in a different location than in humans, i.e. in the thymus-like organ. So humans have a thymus when they're kids. It's an organ right above your throat, kind of down in the little depression right below your trachea. It's big in kids and gets smaller and smaller as we age and becomes vestigial. It helps train our immune cells so they don't attack us. So apparently this thing has an active thymus as an adult and does not have bone marrow like we do to produce blood cells, and these are produced in that organ or something. A transverse section of the bone reveals osteon and osteocytes. Okay, so bone cells. There appears to be few osteoblasts, the bone creating cells, and no osteoclasts. That's the bone reabsorbing cells. So apparently this thing doesn't remodel its bony architecture the way we do. This indicates that the bones are no longer growing and cannot absorb the minerals present or adapt mechanically to changes in posture. This also means that these poor little guys would probably have a long time healing a bone. So if you do have to evade one, try not to break their bones. That's just mean. Biological system, respiratory system. Their cellular respiration is equivalent to ours. They need to oxidize organic components to produce energy. Their lungs have no reciprocating action, but rather have a unidirectional flow of air, similar to those seen in birds, which is more efficient than ours. It is speculated that this is in response to the brain's elevated metabolic needs. I don't know a lot about the way birds breathe. I know how humans breathe. We have the diaphragm below our lungs, and it contracts and stretches down. That kind of pulls a vacuum on our lungs and inflates them. And then when we exhale, we just relax that diaphragm, or we can forcefully contract our abdominal muscles, which kind of forces the breath out. We only do that during running or when screaming during scary movies, which I do not do, by the way. That was the person behind me watching Talk to Me. Oh my gosh, that thing was scary. Vocalization is produced by vibration of the cell of the wall membrane at the junction between the 2 air sacs, so they can vocalize. Of the wall membrane at the junction between 2 air sacs. I don't know how they would know that's where vocalization takes place. Maybe there's something that leads them to believe that. The circulatory system of EBOs is rather analogous to ours. The heart is located in the mediastinum in the chest area, but in a more medial position toward the center, directly beneath the sternum. Ours is not. Ours is on the left side. The heart has 2 ventricles and 2 atria. Ours does also. There is an aorta, pulmonary vein, pulmonary artery, and a vena cava. Probably 2 pulmonary veins and 2 pulmonary arteries if they have 2 lungs. Blood flowing to the pulmonary capillaries via the pulmonary artery is pumped against the flow of air, maximizing gas exchange efficiency. Interesting. The blood-gas barrier is relatively narrow in these capillaries, at least compared to a human. Then oxygen-rich blood is returned to the heart and then expelled to the aorta and the rest of the body. Before returning to the heart, the blood will pass through the hepatorenal organ, which is sort of a combined liver-kidney apparently, which among other things filters and controls osmotic pressure of the blood. Now, osmotic pressure is like the sodium is what really maintains our osmotic pressure in our blood. Potassium is kept in the cells, sodium is kept outside the cells. When we want to make a nerve fire, we open channels to allow the sodium to rush in, potassium to rush out, and that moves a little turnstile that powers our cells. The blood itself is also analogous to that of a human. However, the proportion of plasma is much higher, so the part of the non-cellular part of blood is much higher, the clear part. Albumin is in similar proportion. Albumin is a protein that is kind of a carrier molecule to carry things around the human blood, and it also provides kind of an osmotic gradient. Hormone levels are much lower. Okay, do they have estrogen or testosterone? Come on, man. Metal ion levels are much higher, particularly copper, and glucose levels are significantly higher. The color of the blood is brownish, given the higher proportion of plasma and concentration of metal ions. On the cellular side, there are erythrocytes, so red blood cells, which, in addition to hemoglobin for binding oxygen, display several complexes capable of binding copper ions. Copper ions. Okay, so do any organisms on Earth have copper carrying molecules to carry oxygen? Yes, they do. The horseshoe crab and all of your octopi and squid have copper-based blood like Mr. Spock. They do not have iron-based blood like humans. These things are very ancient and interesting, and they have evolved to have a completely different type of blood than the rest of life on Earth. This helps them at lower oxygen concentrations deep in the oceans. These things, I guess, could survive at a lower oxygen concentration than humans. Okay, so normal pressure is about 100,000 pascals or 100 kilopascals. If you're in a spaceship with pure oxygen, you can, like they did in the Apollo capsules and stuff like that, you can go down to about 17 kilopascals before you fall over and die. Now, you would not be functional at that level. So these things they could survive a lower oxygen environment than we can, most likely. It's not clear what role these copper ions play, but we believe it neutralizes blood ammonia, interesting among other things. Several cell types with leukocyte, white blood cells, fight infection. Characteristics have been observed, but no comprehensive knowledge of them exists. Platelets are present. Platelets are the parts, the cells in your blood that carry the blood clotting mechanisms, but in smaller proportions than in humans. Well, they probably don't beat each other to death like humans do, so they didn't need a higher functioning clotting system. Excreto-sudiferous system. So excreto, for excretion, for getting rid of waste, and sudiferous, sweat. So the excretion sweat system. This system is completely different from what I've seen. As mentioned earlier, there is no large orifice like an anus or urethra to get rid of biological waste. Instead, there are countless small pores on the surface of the skin. There's a large medial organ called the hepatorenal organ, which acts as both kidney and liver and is central to maintaining homeostasis, normal body function. Normal organ function. This organ is highly vascularized, has a lot of blood vessels, and the blood must pass through it before returning to the heart. Its role is, among other things, to purify the blood of metabolic waste, just like our liver. Waste is excreted into the equivalent of a ureter, which branches out into 4. Each branch flows toward one of the 4 limbs, and in turn, these branches divide until they end up as thousands of excretory pores. We have something similar that collects extra fluid, which is the lymphatic system in our body. So we know of arteries and veins, but a lot of people, non-medical people, don't know that we have a separate circulatory system called the lymphatic system that collects the extra fluid and dumps it back into a vein in our bodies. So these things have the opposite. They have these things going out to take waste products out to the skin. The motility of this excretory system is mediated by a weak peristalsis at the proximal level. So these tubes pulse. They have muscles on them and they pulse in a rhythmic pulse, which is peristalsis, to move fluid along. At the proximal level, so they pulse where they're big and on the 4 main branches. Okay, so this is kind of a primitive heart-like thing. If you have one-way valves, these things could squeeze down and move things in one direction. We have one-way valves in the veins of our legs, and blood is not pumped out of the legs by heart action. It is pumped out of the legs by muscle action, which is why it's important to walk every day, your health tip for this week. Peristalsis ceases around the first distal junction, so the muscles end and it no longer squeezes. As there is no urea cycle, the ammonia concentration at the exit of the hepatorenal organ is very high. This ammonia is carried to the pores and gives the distinct odor I mentioned earlier. The rationale behind this unusual excretory system is directly related to this excreted ammonia, which enables thermoregulation by evaporating on the skin surface. Okay, ammonia is an excellent coolant. So evaporative cooling on the skin surface would be a neat way to cool down. However, he said that they were covered with a biolayer, which I guess absorbs the ammonia and then passes it on to be evaporated on the biosuit surface. The greater the physical effort, the greater the metabolism. This in turn leads to a rise in temperature and corresponding increased metabolic waste via amino acid metabolism. Catabolism is the breakdown of organic molecules. This leads to an increase in filtration and ammonia excretion, which ultimately lowers body temperature. Interesting. So the opposite of catabolism is metabolism. Metabolism, you're building up organic molecules. Catabolism, you're breaking them down. Digestive system. The digestive system is extremely underdeveloped. There is no stomach in the familiar sense. However, now it's not uncommon for people typing fast to do this. I do it all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean he's not smart. And it actually probably means he was typing fast when he typed this out, which if you can type this out fast means you're pretty smart and well educated. However, there is a pseudo-stomach, a kind of stomach, located at the transition between the thoracic and abdominal cavities. So between the chest and the abdomen. This organ is not involved in digestion, but only serves as a reservoir. A sphincter controls the flow, so a muscular valve controls the flow of food into the intestine. The intestine is limited to the equivalent of our small intestine, okay? So they don't have a colon to solidify the waste like we do. It stays liquid in their system. Interesting. It only serves to absorb liquids and nutrients and acts as the main digestion site. If that's true, then their food had better be completely absorbed, or they're going to puff up like the guy from Willy Wonka and have some trouble. It has villi and microvilli like ours. These are finger-like projections off the wall of the intestine. They increase the surface area to absorb nutrients. The intestine ends in the hepatorenal organ, where non-digested matter is transported to the ureter and excretory system. Residues are dissolved in the ammonia of metabolic waste for excretion. Very interesting. There's an organ near the pseudostomachal sphincter that secretes digestive enzymes directly into the intestine. Okay, these enzymes break up the food. This organ is inspirationally called the digestive organ. It secretes many proteolytic, protein-dissolving enzymes, and glucoside hydrolases. Those are enzymes that dissolve sugars. So apparently they eat proteins and sugars, which if they had an Earth-like genetics, they would need to. Given the absence of teeth, the narrowness and rigidity of the esophagus, the absence of a true stomach, and the absence of defecation, it is strongly believed that EBOs can only consume food in liquid form. It is assumed that given the high metabolic needs of their brains, this food would have a high carbohydrate concentration. In order to meet other metabolic needs, there must also be a high protein content in the food consumed. High carb, high protein, okay. These two statements, so these are like our protein shakes that you see the bodybuilders chugging. These two statements are supported by the type of enzyme secreted by the digestive organ. So if you kidnap one of these, bring him a protein shake and you might keep him alive. It is therefore speculated that the food consumed is a sort of broth rich in sugar and protein, which probably also has a high copper content. Given the strict limitations on the type of food that they can consume, it's unlikely that this type of creature could survive in our biosphere without technological support. That's almost certainly accurate. You could try to figure out what amino acids it could dissolve and restrict its diet only to those amino acids so it doesn't build up too much excretory. There are humans who have genetic defects that keep them from processing certain amino acids. Those build up and cause serious problems. These are called inborn errors of metabolism, and that's what this poor thing would suffer if it tried to drink any amino acids that we need that it does not and cannot metabolize. Endocrine system. Knowledge of the endocrine system is minimal. We know that cells are receptive to bovine growth hormones, so it's assumed that certain functions are regulated by such a system. Endocrine mechanisms are very complex, and it goes without saying that they are best studied on living subjects. Very true. Immune system. The immune system is another unknown. There seems to be an innate immune system, but there doesn't seem to be any adaptive immunity. Okay, so an innate immune system is like the horseshoe crabs again. They have, and crocodiles and alligators, they have a very strong innate immune system that makes them almost immune to any kind of infection, but they don't have much of an adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity is where we make our antibodies. So we use our vaccines and get our antibodies, those of us smart enough to do it, to help our adaptive immune system get ready for infections and stuff like that. Apparently theirs is less well developed. And if they were living on a spaceship and not being exposed to a lot of germs, that would make sense. At least not similar to what is known. There's a thymus-like organ near the heart that's proportionally larger than in humans. I talked about that. That's big in kids, small in adults. This organ seems to be where all blood cells mature. Some cells have leukocyte characteristics such as granularity. Leukocytes are white blood cells. Granular white blood cells go around and eat bacteria and fight infection. The immune cells that germinate here have a high copper concentration. The surface receptors of innate immune cells have not yet been characterized, so we might as well say that all of this work remains to be done. Nervous system. The nervous system is also relatively similar. The spinal cord begins at the space of the central lobe of the brain, propagates down the vertebral column. In the vertebra, there are ganglia made of afferent and efferent neurons. In short, other than the CNS, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Musculoskeletal system. The musculoskeletal system is very ordinary, albeit underdeveloped. Most of the human skeletal muscles have an equivalent. Only the hands, feet, and forearms are different. It should be noted that the proportion of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers is different from that in a human. Okay, type 1 power, type 2 endurance. Indeed, type 1 outnumbers type 2 by a factor of 10. That means that they could do short bursts of movement, but probably would not go on a long walk with you. Once again, showing that go for, make a fast run for it, bob and weave from the tractor beam, get far enough away, they can't catch you. Humans are unique among the animal kingdom that we have an extremely advanced endurance system. Humans can walk a horse to death. Humans can walk after a wild horse until it collapses from exhaustion. Humans used to run deer to death before we had horses and bow and arrows. We would jog after them. They would out-sprint and outrun us, and then sprint and outrun us, and then they would get tired. Only the pronghorn antelope can hit 40 miles an hour for like an hour at a time, something just outrageous. They're the champions of all time. But a human being can both beat a quarter horse in a short sprint and can also walk a horse to exhaustion. And humans are kind of unique among the animal kingdom for that. We speculate that artificial molecular machines may be present in the body and that copper, if present, would be essential to their function or assembly. Importantly, no AMMs, artificial molecular machines, have been observed. No nanites. Question 1. Amazing story. Have you shared this with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence or with AARO, and do you have evidence to back this up? Thank you. No, I haven't, and no, I won't. It sounds like a honey trap to me. I will not place my life in the hands of politicians. Wise move. I have no proof other than this message. I know it's not much, but it's what I'm prepared to offer. Okay. My take on this. Whoever wrote this knows what they're talking about. They're saying the right things. I don't see any, fundamental errors. Maybe a molecular biologist will say, this M2P thing is stupid. But from a physician point of view, this sounds pretty good. Well, that was a read. So they are bioengineered worker bees. Any elemental components that are unattributable to our biome. I wanted to know if they have a coccyx. If they're from human DNA, then they might have a coccyx, a vestigial tail that still exists on the human spine that would be unnecessary on theirs. So someone asked this guy, who uses Reddit a lot, I don't, if the thing had a coccyx. Yes, knowing that they're disposable, unable to live independently without technological support, and that they're ephemeral. By ephemeral, he means they're not going to be reproducing, they're not going to be living independently. These are organic drones, so to speak. The only suitable hypothesis is that they are alive only to accomplish their task. Can you clarify your question about elemental components? Okay, this guy needs to quit answering questions if he doesn't want to get caught. This is real, and the government's seen this. They can track and trap anybody making comments on this or responding. I haven't read everything in detail, but can you expand on the document of their religion? Interesting. EBOs believe that the soul is not an extension of the individual, but rather a fundamental characteristic of nature that expresses itself as a field, not unlike gravity. How the heck would he know this from the body? Okay, so there has to be researchers somewhere else who got to chat with one just before he croaked. In the presence of life, this field acquires complexity, resulting in negative entropy, if that makes sense. Okay. This gain in complexity is directly correlated with the concentration of living organisms in a given location. With time and with the right conditions, life in turn becomes more complex until the appearance of sentient life. After reaching this threshold, the field begins to express itself through these sentient beings, forming what we call the soul. Okay, soul, it comes from a word meaning breath, spirit, same thing, spiritus. That's why you do a spirometer to see how you're breathing. Ancient humans thought that the breath was life and therefore the soul. So when a baby took its first breath, it's when it got its soul. And when you breathe your last breath, your soul had left your body. Your breath had left your body. This has taken on metaphysical meanings over time. This in turn further accelerates the complexity of the field. Eventually, when the field reaches a critical mass, there will be a sort of apotheosis. Okay, you get enough sentient beings all in one place and something happens. It's not clear what this means in practical terms, but this quest for apotheosis seems to be the EBO's main motivation. Okay, childhood's end would be a good example of an apotheosis. A dramatic shift in happening and apparently from when you get enough critical mass of sentience. The author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as an appendix. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief but an obvious truth. Well, of course, nothing's a belief but an obvious truth to those who believe it. Hopefully they won't be proselytizing and going door to door knocking. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that memory and experience persist as part of the field. This fact would influence the philosophy and culture of EBOs, resulting in a society that doesn't fear death. That's not true, okay? That's not necessarily true. Many human beings believe in an afterlife, a good, happy afterlife where everything's wonderful. Those people still fear death, right? And they don't drop down and pray when a truck's about to hit them. They jump out of the way. So I don't buy that. But which places no importance or reverence on individuality. And that's possible if they're like termites. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. Guys, if our population gets too high, we're going to go into that sentient criticality black hole and warp ourselves to another dimension. Paradoxically, they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. Well, that's clear from all the rectal probing they've been doing to Bubba's, getting picked up in country roads all over the United States since the 1950s. Please be advised that I'm speaking from memory of something I read more than 10 years ago, so take the following with a grain of salt. Also, I'm not a philosopher or an artist, so please excuse my struggle to properly formulate the concepts and my dry terminology. Finally, note that this information comes from a document whose author was directly interacting with an EBO, so there was one that was alive. It is not specified whether it was an ambassador, a crash survivor, or a prisoner. I guaranteed, if they don't care about the individuals, and once the saucer crashed, they said, well. The means of communication were not specified either. Interesting. WTF, he dropped the location of the lab. Battelle National Biodefense Institute. It is on Google Map. Well, okay. Probably about 1,000 people work there. It's probably 999 now because this poor guy probably got located. So what's my take on this? It seems internally consistent. I don't see anything that trips my scamometer. So someone who knew what they were talking about either created a really nifty hoax, or we really have EBOs and we're chatting with them. Let's see what Congress can find. Thanks for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay safe at Astra Pro Terra.